the purpose of this webinar, conversation, I would say, is to share with the wider audience this volume, Professional Development Through Teacher Research, Stories from Language Teacher Educators. This has been recently published. It was actually published in March with Multilingual Matters, and we are very pleased with the book and really happy that we have managed to bring together different voices from, except for Antarctica, from all the continents in the world. So that's great, because it is not something that will usually happen. And therefore we are really happy that you all accepted to participate in this volume and that you were extremely patient with the process, because, well, we wrote this through the pandemic and it showed in every aspect of the process. So we are really thrilled with this volume. Emily, any comments from you at this stage?
Just that it's wonderful to actually meet you all finally at the end of this process. And I think it was just fascinating to read all of your chapters and to really sort of bring up topics such as the way that your student learning and your own learning intersect. And that was fascinating to read about, and the way that a lot of you were getting your students to do research at the same time that you were doing research. So I found that really exciting to read about. I think Lewis has just joined us. Hello.
Hello.
So can you listen
Yeah.
to me? Does it come across? Okay. Sorry for my delay. I was in class, but I've finally been able to connect. So I'm simply so happy to be here and listening to all your ideas and what you have to say, and for us to discuss, and let's try to share our ideas and experiences, if you may.
Thank you very much indeed, Luis. And without further ado, then let's start with the contributors, and without them we couldn't have put together this volume. And well, you have around 5 minutes to briefly tell us about the chapter and the main takeaways, I would say, that you would like to share with the wider professional community. So the idea is that we follow the order in which the chapters are presented or found in the volume. So hello, Nancy. Now we can see you.
Hey, how are you?
Oh, we are good.
I didn't know my video was off.
Oh, but never mind. So thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, with pleasure.
Okay, so let's start with Anne. Anne, over to you.
Yes. Okay, so I will be the first. Okay, so my chapter is chapter 2 in the book, and it's about, the title is Promoting Pre-Service Teachers' Collaborative Reflective Practice, and our context is in a TESOL teacher education program in Vietnam. So my study was carried out in a 4-year undergraduate TESOL honors program at the university in the north of Vietnam, and in the course I have conducted an action research and a small case study of 2 students, which I reported in the chapter about how they were involved in the practice of reflective practice collaboratively together with their friends. So the course lasted 15 weeks, and I incorporated like collaborative reflective practice and see how the students learn and how they benefited from that practice. So I use Farrell's framework of reflective practice to frame data collection and data analysis. And well, in the chapter, I presented the findings about the learning journey of 2 students in that course, about how they have learned and how they have learned from the reflection or reflective practice throughout the course using Farrell's framework. The 5 components of Farrell's framework was employed to collect data when I interviewed them, and also when I analyze the data. And what I reflected at the end of the chapter was my what I learned from the process as well as a teacher educator in the course. They were learning, like Emily just said, they were learning, and then I found myself I could learn a lot from the process of talking to the students and guiding them through different stages in the collaborative practice. They together co-planned a lesson, co-taught a lesson, and re-evaluate the lesson at the end. And when I incorporated action research and a small case study in the process, I had more time to talk to the students. Normally when I just taught the students in the course, we just finished the lesson for example, we have about 3 periods, which is around 2 hours of teaching them. But then when I conducted that research, I spent time after the lesson talking to them more about what they learned, like what they learned outside the class, like what I cannot observe in the classroom. So I learned a lot from that process. And as I said at the end of the chapter, this is the process of co-constructing knowledge of reflective practice. Like they learned about different stages and steps of doing reflective practice, but I also learned about like organizing activities for them. And also I learned about kind of how my kind of learning attitude can influence them. So like one of the students commented that we were really interested because we found that you were very open to us and you discussed with us how you learn yourself. So like the learning happen for both the students and the teacher educator, and that's what I learned, and I benefited a lot from the process. And I think that is the message of the book, and I try to bring it to the readers about how a teacher educator can benefit from doing research with the students. So that's about my chapter, and you can read more in the book when you get the book. Okay. Is it okay, Dario? 5
yes,
minutes?
yeah, that was lovely. That was lovely, and thank you very much for sharing the main the highlights of your chapter. And we will come back to the issues that you have addressed, particularly in terms of encouraging teachers, or in our case, like teacher educators, to carry out research for professional development and for the enhancement of teaching and learning processes. Michael, over to you now.
Hi, I'm presenting chapter 3, which was co-written. So could I just make quick apologies for Neil Johnson, my co-writer. He's airborne somewhere between Japan and the UK, so he couldn't be with us, but he sends his apologies. So basically, we researched an MA course at the University of Sunderland. So again, teacher education. So we researched one particular module, which was the MA in Second Language Acquisition, which we run here at the University of Sunderland. And basically, we kind of looked at it through an exploratory practice framework. So we began with a puzzle, and the puzzle was this, that when we looked at a particular element of this module, which was a distance learning module, which ran over 12 weeks, we found that participation levels on the online discussions were very low, very patchy, and not really very satisfactory. So we wanted to try and engender a kind of more of a sense of distance learning being a kind of something that's social, and people being part of a community, and it being more collaborative and dialogic. So that was the kind of puzzle, and also fed into the aim So the way we did it is teaching is always an intervention. So we looked at a piece of software, which is called VoiceThread. I don't know if anybody's familiar with it, but I won't go into the ins and outs of it. But basically, we kind of road tested and we trialed VoiceThread as an alternative way of conducting and engendering participation in these discussions. And then what we did in terms of evaluating that was we asked the students what they thought of it at the end of the 12 weeks. And obviously we had our own reflections as teachers, and the things that we took from that also fed into the evaluation of how successful VoiceThread was in terms of increasing the quality of the participation, so and increasing the kind of sense that we were a kind of TESOL community of practice. What did we take away from it? Well, we found that as teachers, and I guess I should speak for myself here because Neil might have a slightly different take on this. I found that it was a good learning curve for me because I'm a 6 out of 10 technology person. So I had to get to grips with the technology and the kind of increased functionality that brought with it. So one of the things that I learned about was how to kind of run online discussions myself as a teacher educator. So I learned something about the technology and the problems that brought with it. But I think the other big takeaway in terms of my own role as a teacher educator was there are other factors as well as simply the pedagogical factors that impact upon student participation. So under neoliberalism, for example, learning's very commodified. We found that there are students who are what we called ghosts in the machine, that they kind of pass through these distance learning modules. They complete the assessment, but they never really participate. And really, I think that the main takeaway is that we need to know more about why those students don't participate in the way in which we might want them to. And that's not just about the pedagogy. That might be about time constraints. They have busy lives, they have families, they have friends, they have a life outside. Many of our students are practicing teachers and doing this as well as. So in a way, and I'll finish there, we kind of became more interested in trying to work out why people, what other reasons aside from teaching and the pedagogy behind it, though that's very interesting, what other reasons mean that students on distance learning courses don't always participate in a kind of collaborative and dialogic way. And I'll finish there.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you very much indeed for your comments. And it is true that we do have, because we've all been through this due to the pandemic or due to distance programs, that we do find students who are reluctant to participate. And sometimes it has nothing to do with the direct pedagogical strategies or shape that a program has, but other aspects, which are of course worth looking into. Homsi, over to you, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, everyone. And my chapter is about first to introduce the context of my study. So it's in a secondary initial teacher education program in an Australian university. And the key problem I'm the coordinator of all the languages curriculum units in this university. And the key problem I find is, although we call this new generation or young generation as digital natives, but every time when I introduce the topic of using technology for language teaching, the reaction I receive is, oh, so difficult, we don't know. I said, but you play with the mobile phone, you spend so much time online every day. They said, but we don't know how to use them in teaching. Yeah, so so I did a project in the unit I'm teaching, and the highlight is the methods and the design, which is based upon by Vygotsky's double stimulation method, and also from the cultural historical activity theory perspective. So rather than like the normal way we teach them, oh, those are the technology you can use, those are the theoretical foundations or underpinning, this is how you do it. So and I try a different way. I will use in double stimulation, they call the first stimulus is to present the participants or the audience with a conflict of interest. Like in my study, I will use a survey, ask them like to tell me how frequent they use technology in their daily life, and what's the challenge in applying those technology in teaching. So by using this survey to raise their awareness about what are exactly the challenge, or the challenging part they feel to apply a technology in teaching, and then follow up with the second stimulus, which are a series of scaffolding materials I present to them. For example, I will group the technology into categories and ask each group of students focus on one type of technologies. For example, like Michael said, voice thread. This is one of all the like a voice software we often use in language teaching, and or like an online test or survey tools as another type of technology. And each group of students, they will search those technologies, and also not only searching for their affordances, like the feature, the limitation, but I also ask them to think how this technology can be applied in their teaching, and what's the pedagogical principle underpin this application. So this will connect their the use of technology with pedagogical knowledge or theoretical knowledge. Then after the working group, they will present to the whole group, and I will demonstrate to them the whole process is also the whole process also used a series of technology for different purposes. For example, the initial survey was an anonymous online survey, and I will it's one of the categories. And also when they working group, I ask them to share their ideas in the Google shared documents. So after each group will present, the whole group can search other groups and have a detailed look at other groups' search and contribution. This show them, see, like this type of online sharing platform, what's the affordances, what can you use them? As a student, then how can you apply them into your future teaching? Then there will be individual assignments for them to choose one topic and design an e-resource for their future language teaching. And so they need to choose a specific learners group topic, and also design the e-resource for that topic. And the results shows that I think I analyzed their group discussion conversation, and I can see during those conversations, new ideas emerged from their when they initiating ideas, showing agreement or disagreement, and contributing ideas. And this process is also the process, their epistemic agency. This is the topic. I put the topic, introduce the topic now. This is the process their epistemic agency emerged. And because the one key feature of double stimulation is it will enhance agency in making changes. So here I focus on the knowledge aspects, the epistemic agency, their agency in creating new ideas. And I find that, yes, through those, this design and the scaffolding, the group discussion, yeah, their epistemic agency has been emerged and further developed and externalized in their final design. So I can see how the ideas initiated from the group discussion and actualized, applied in the final design by using different types of technology for their like a purpose of teaching. Yeah, and things I learned from that is I feel, yeah, I feel one thing is I feel, oh, this is not just a theory. And when I apply it in my teaching, yeah, I can see the link between research and the teaching. And I feel rewarded when I see my students, their knowledge grow and they can come up with some creative ideas. Yeah, this is, yeah, this is my chapter.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And again, the idea is that when we discuss some of these issues, particularly those linked to our own understanding of the field through the research that we have carried out ourselves, and you see that it has a clear impact on the decisions that we make in the classroom. Now let's travel to Argentina. Jimena.
Yes, well, good morning, everyone. Okay, so, well, I wrote chapter number 5. And, well, the context, I will start with the context, as most of you have done. The context is a teacher, an EFL teacher education program in Córdoba, Argentina. And more specifically, the context was an EFL teaching practicum. And, well, I'd like to start by saying that of course, this research study stems from my own concerns as a teacher educator regarding the student-teachers development processes. But, and mainly, I would say, this was motivated by a group of former student teachers' own concerns. Some of these former student teachers were already novel graduate teachers. And along the years, several years, I would say, they had voiced concerns regarding their the emotions that student teachers experienced while on the process of the practicum, and some of the beliefs that they held, some of them inhibitive beliefs that they held as they went through this process. So then we were becoming more and more aware of these diverse and multiple emotions that they felt, all these beliefs, as I said before. So this led us, I mean, this group of former student teachers and novel graduates to submit a research proposal at our university and conduct this research study, which we did for several years, 3 years, in fact. And our initial aim was to try to unveil these emotions and beliefs, and especially to focus on the relationship among these two constructs, how they interacted with one another, this dialogic relationship. So this was our first aim. So we collected data, we tried to examine and identify those beliefs and emotions. And then later on, we came with the second aim, and that was that aim, which was mainly, of course, or based on and triggered by the findings of the first phase of our research study. We tried to find and test different teacher interventions that we could actually enact in order to help student teachers deal with, reflect upon in collaborative ways on their emotions and feelings during the practicum. So then the findings and the research study that I reported in the chapter mainly focused on this second aim, in order to try to capture the effects of different interventions that we planned and implemented on this dynamic nature of beliefs and emotions. Of course, you can read the full findings in the chapter, but briefly, I can say that student teachers who participated, I mean, student teachers, when I say student teachers, in this case, the participants were the ones that were taking up the practicum during 2019. And most of them assessed or evaluated the interventions we planned and implemented in a positive light. And this was, of course, very encouraging. And it was a good way, or we tried in this chapter, we tried to share some practical ways in which we can actually let's say, provide student teachers with opportunity to reflect upon and deal with their emotions and beliefs while on the process of the practicum. So if I have to reflect on my takeaways, my own personal and professional development while carrying out this research study together with my own students and with colleagues, who had been my students before, I would say that, well, of course, we could see that there were some qualitative changes, meaningful changes that we could enact in our teaching practice. Of course, there were several levels and increasing levels of teacher awareness. But I would like to say that, well, the most important thing, or one of the most important aspects I would like to highlight, has to do with the role of collaboration in this research study. To me, collaboration meant development. And the important thing is also this collaboration. Well, that we can learn together with others, in this case, with former student teachers. It was really nice to see, really, let's say, rewarding to see how we could enact this bottom-up exercise, which triggered our own potential as researchers and also as teachers. And well, it also helped me to, as I wrote in the chapter, to cultivate the relationship with my students, to see my students in a different light, since we all could find voice in the process. So, well, that's all I have to share. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jimena. And as you just said, I think that in all trajectories as teacher educators doing research with student teachers and future teachers, future colleagues, we also grow in terms of collaboration and the way we see them and how their identities and our own identities develop as well. Cristina, we are all ears.
Yes, thank you. Well, we go now to chapter 8.
Yes.
My chapter deals with a visual narrative inquiry that engages in narrative pedagogy. It was carried out in a language course at the ELT Teacher Education Program at the National University of Mar del Plata in Argentina. And this contribution is part of my 10-year-long narrative inquiry into students' identities and ideas of diversity. My research in general aims at generating classroom practices during which student teachers can work with their own stories and talk about their own stories rather than repeat other instructors or professors or writers' stories. I worked as a teacher educator here and participant inquirer with 14 student teachers. And first they wrote individually and then they shared orally in class a set of stories that were motivated by the use of a picture book. The chapter presents my thematizations that were inductively gathered from the stories that we collected in class. This visual narrative inquiry into student teachers or future teachers' ideas of diversity and multiplicity, shall I say, helps us to learn about their own ideas about identification and variety. Identification, self-identification, variety, and identity, they are part of the core curriculum for language teacher education in Argentina, and they are also part of the core learning priorities that language teachers must teach in Argentinian primary and secondary schools. So this means that as teacher educators, we must listen to students' voices, We must listen to what students have to say about identity, about their subjectivities. And in the same vein, student teachers should be encouraged to derive knowledge, to construct their own knowledge from their own practices and their situated contexts. Well, the experience here, writing the chapter for the book, has been an inspiration because we have shared contributions with teachers and educators and researchers from all over the world. So we had the opportunity of sharing what we love to do with a group of people who were knowledgeable and understanding. They were a very sympathetic peer group. The chapter in general, I think that not just personally, but in general terms, it has allowed us all to intertwine these two identities. Our knowing and writing as inquirers and practitioners and researchers. And on the other hand, it has allowed us to intertwine our doing and working as teacher educators in actual classrooms, in this case, teaching prospective teachers. And we know that professors and researchers must bridge these two identities. So if we can narrow this gap here, is because we wrote research that stems from our own teaching. I strongly believe in deprivatizing these classroom stories. That means making them public and granting them a voice that can be read or can be heard by a large number of people. So in this way, research and teaching create a whole, and it contributes our own continuous professional development. And I think that would be all.
Thank you, Cristina. And to me, your words are extremely powerful in terms of making our practices public and sharing what happens inside the classroom with people in the community and why not beyond. Tammy, we are now flying to Ecuador.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry, I was a bit late, some connection issues there. Our chapter is a co-author chapter. My colleagues couldn't be present in this morning. Her names are Monica and Juanita. What we did is, well, let me tell you a bit of the context. As university professors, we have to complete several activities besides teaching and researching, and one of them is supervising our students' graduation projects, their own theses. We work at a teacher training program and an EFL teaching training program. So our students are teachers who will eventually become English teachers. So what we decided to do is actually research our own experiences supervising their work, which we encourage them to be teacher research, students research their own students. And so we wanted to analyze how those experiences, journeys, and those reflections while supervising our students' work actually contributed to our own professional development in this dual role as supervisors, but also as teacher researchers. So we took this new position of being supervisors as researchers. So we analyze qualitatively our conversations, also our written contributions on the topic. And we look at supervision as a social learning activity in which collaboration was one of the most important aspects. We developed this study looking at the different ways if we could supervise our students, what were the duties, what were the responsibilities we had, not just as guiding them in the content knowledge, but also being mentors and being worried about their personal struggles. So that's how we conducted this research. What else can I tell you? Sorry about that. We analyzed, as I said, our journeys, and we came up with 3 different themes to group or analysis. So we navigated first a role as, or dual role, as I said, as supervisor researchers. So the activities we had to do merely as supervisors, but how those activities also helped us in our own roles as researchers, because we were helping our students in the research process and we were learning from their research. Also, we looked at the relationships we have with them. So the supervision process itself, in terms of the relationship with the students, the expectations we had from them, and the how we provided feedback as well. And then on the last section, we looked at supervision as a path for our own professional development. So it is an ongoing process. It is something we're doing all the time. So we're always looking at our students' theses, and we realize that we're never trained for it. So what we do is it's based on what we learn as supervisees, like writing or bachelor thesis or master's thesis or later doctoral thesis. But we were never trained on the process of doing it. So we looked at actually supervising the work as a way of training ourselves. And that is the professional development we're doing. We want to encourage also students for them to become teacher researchers, to start acquiring this identity by telling them how important it is to actually look at our own teaching practices or students' development, so they can also be involved in this process of professional development.
Thank you, Tammy. And it is true that at some point, or with some professional identities that we need to develop, we have to take charge and perhaps engage ourselves in self-led and self-initiated professional development. And with that in mind, let's go now to Colombia. Liliana, Jermaine, over to you.
Okay, thank you guys so much. Well, my co-author Liliana and I, we actually put together, co-wrote Chapter 11, Mapping Transformations in Teacher Education, Colombian Teachers' Enactments Through Mentoring. I'm going to just start by giving some context as to what type of programs and what type of research we actually were carrying out, conducting. We're working pretty much with graduate programs and the English language teaching programs for students here, teacher educators here in Colombia. And we were able to collect data over, I should say, 7 cohorts from 2016 to 2019 to approx. Basically, the program, as any of the other programs we have here, teachers are looking for an opportunity to increase their teaching practices. And in our case, we have to add a couple extra things, which is their language learning in terms of themselves being language learners, increasing that role, but also writing skills. So therefore, Liliana and I, it's interesting because I start the research process in first semester, and Liliana, she finishes the process in 4th semester. So for years, I would say close to a decade, we have had an opportunity to see the writing process and see how things have been going. So as a result of that, we decided we need to do something else with the writing, do something else, try to motivate them, become mentors and things of that nature. As a result of that, we worked with them, trying to figure out different ways in terms of scaffolding the writing process, working with them as mentors, not just, and then becoming colleagues, and then also as writers towards the end of the process. And we had an opportunity to do lots of things here. Our study was initially, we took place in Bogota, Colombia. However, we're looking at 2 different graduate programs, which one is a face-to-face program on campus, and the other program is 100% online, covering the entire country in that particular instance, with participants from all over. So the information was quite interesting, with education from primary to secondary, higher education, language institutions, etc. And it was quite interesting as to how we were able to, turn that research writing process, it's something, very difficult, very, very stubborn for them, for the most part, into a much more enriching learning experience through mentoring in that particular case. So Liliana is going to continue by actually, giving you some highlights of the chapter, and actually, some of the things that motivated us a little bit more, and some of the, I should say, key findings towards the end. Go ahead.
Basically, what we wanted to do is to take a picture of, like a longitudinal picture of what we were living in the programs. As we all may know, one of the biggest concerns in our practice is the fosterage of critical literacy, critical thinking, and naturally associated with the endeavors of academic writing. So we had or we are living, because this hasn't ended, right? No. We wanted to picture what happened if we did some alignments in the curriculum. What happened if we started implementing some strategies so students could be enacted, empowered, and fostered with a little bit of more agency to develop what they needed to develop in the time frame of a master's program. So we decided we started by doing some alignments in the curriculum, and we learned many things over the process. We learned to be more practical in the way, as my colleague was saying, you know, we were never trained to be supervisors and co-authors with students. So I think that it was like a magic recipe that you were trying on and experiencing and, you know, doing the cycles and the many iterations to make it work. We combined also, another intake that we took is the combination, the fission combination or the fusion with andragogy and experiential learning, right? All of our graduates have busy lives, and you have as an instructor the responsibility to cope with that and to be more understanding with that. And they need to be, as someone, and I love that in this volume, we are really highlighting the role of co-construction of knowledge and the role of collaboration. This seems like a common motto in our chapters. So we were more cognizant of the responsibility and the issues that these naturally, was necessary to be done. Just to close, because there are many things, and as we are making invitations to read the chapters, I'm making an invitation to read the entire book, it seems like, right? We gradually lived a transformation with our students. So it was not only a student transformation, but a teacher transformation, or perhaps an instructor and researcher, co-researcher transformation, moving from understanding or reconceptualizing the teacher's role, making moves to the pedagogy, moving into new or perhaps newly refined assessment practices, passing through tutoring and mentoring schemes based on experiential learning philosophies, and getting to the point in which their academic writing was decent, was up to standards. And interestingly, we give a couple of examples that allow the audience to see how this reflective transform practice becomes in a co-researcher, writer, self-regulated practice. To the point in which some of our students are publishing with us, some of our students are publishing on their own. So, well, welcome to our chapter, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you both. Thank you, Liliana, and thank you, Jermaine. And now we are flying to Kenya, and Nancy.
Hi, everybody.
To you. Yes.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Oh, lovely. Here in Kenya, it's in the afternoon, as opposed to most of you, you're in the morning. Our area is on teaching oral skills to student teachers. And the chapter reflects or revolves around a visually impaired teacher educator, which is me. We have co-authored with my mentor, supervisor, lecturer, Alice. And the context is actually my own experiences as a visually impaired teacher. And the study, our research is captured or is fascinated by my experiences as a teacher of language. I am a teacher of English and French. I have to let that message go, because my speech reader is articulating the message that has been written. Okay, sorry. During my life as a student, as a teacher trainee, in my language lessons, we were 4 of us that were visually impaired. And so there is this area and it was taught, as you all are aware, that it involves a lot of visual illustrations. So during my teacher training years, this section was taught excluding us, because we could not see the visuals that our lecturers were illustrating. And so when I trained as a teacher, and I had to required us to look at very minimal areas of phonology, and I was quite comfortable. It didn't cost me anything. However, when I went to further my studies, I met Alice, who was my lecturer then, and she taught me a unit, the introductory part, studies of language, where phonology was a component of her course. And as usual, I switched off, because in my training, nobody used to teach me phonology. It was just presumed that those who have visual challenges cannot internalize or perceive phonological aspects of language. And as usual, I switched off from her class, and she grabbed me. I actually dozed off, and she came and grabbed my hands and actually tried to do imaginative illustrations with my hands of the various articulation organs and how they produce sounds and voice. And from that time, I got a concept of what she was actually teaching. When I finished my undergraduate studies, I enrolled for my master's soon after. And again, I encountered a visiting professor who in turn had to teach those phonological aspects of language. And she painstakingly took me through the session, but I was able to conceptualize what was happening. And after my master's studies, I was employed, or I was posted to teach in a teacher training college here in Kenya, where we train primary school teachers as a teacher of English. And I came to learn that in the syllabus then, I was supposed to tackle phonology in a topic referred to as English speech. And as many of you have cited, it is always very uncomfortable for one to just step in class, especially in a college, and start teaching an area that you're not very sure you will deliver. First of all, because of my disability, and secondly, because of the presumption that everybody has, that a teacher with a visual disability cannot really handle phonetic classes. And to my surprise then, okay, before I go to my surprise, I would engage colleagues to come and help me tackle this area. But then I looked at the content and noticed that all it entails is what my supervisor, Alice, had taught me initially. And I decided not to be calling colleagues to help me. And one day I decided, okay, let me tackle. Okay, one day I invited a colleague to come to my class, and I sat with her as she taught. And I realized that she wasn't doing anything so serious that I didn't know. And so I decided from then on to be handling this on my own. And to my surprise, my students would always tell me that I would explicate the concepts better than my colleagues who would, of course, illustrate on the board and take it easy. And of course, some of my colleagues would simply not teach that area, and others would tell me that when it comes to transcription and phonetical symbols, they would refer to the dictionary and send the students to look at the dictionary. So, and surprisingly, my students would do well in this area, and everybody else is always wondering how I tackle this. And for that reason, then I called my supervisor, my mentor, and I was so fascinated to let her know that I am tackling phonetics in my class with the concept that she taught me. And this is what now fascinated our study. And if you read, you'll find that the study revolves around my personal experiences as a child, as a teacher student, both as a teacher trainee and as I furthered my studies, and as a professional, my practical situation. And so I came to learn that as we did the research with Alice, we collected data through interviews, and of course I kept journals because we did this during the pandemic, and partly by the time we were doing this, our colleges were suspended because the curriculum was changing. And so we didn't have students. So I had time to reflect around what I have been doing previously, and of course to prepare for myself for the new curriculum. Kenya is now embracing a new curriculum, the competence-based curriculum. And so I was reflecting on what I have been doing, and now what I will do now that the curriculum is changing and it entails different tackling of this. And because the curriculum has already resumed, I have found myself with this knowledge of phonology and how to now internalize and conceptualize ideas to my learners. I have found that technology comes in handy. Oops. Can you hear me?
Yes, Nancy, we lost you. We cannot see you, but we can still hear you. Could you please, do you mind if you could round up?
Yes. So, and that is what led to our study. And of course, our takeaway home is that nothing is so serious that a visually impaired teacher cannot handle, so long as the concepts are well articulated to them, for them to now use their imaginative skills to deliver. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nancy. And thank you, Alice. And it is a compelling story about inclusive education and being aware of the diversity of the students that we can encounter, and sometimes the things that we take for granted until we become like fully aware of the different learners that we that we do have in all our classrooms. Luis, shall we now move on to a bit of discussion about like main themes that we have talked about today? And I know there was one question from Michael in the chat box.
Well, so I didn't know it was my turn now. I thought there were some other speakers left.
The world is full of surprises.
Absolutely. I mean, even in one of these online sessions, and one is always surprised. Again, I want to thank all the contributors. I'm sure Darío and Emily, as well as I, enjoyed so much reading over this text and learning a lot from them, and trying to picture ourselves in the situations that all of you described in those chapters, and which you have very successfully summarized in this case. It is true that as of late, I've been reading a lot about John Dewey, and one of the concepts that came to my mind, or comes to my mind every single day, and my wife is completely bored with it, is the educational spiral, which is quite abstract, but my students love it actually. And it's again a spiral, seeing education and seeing growth, and seeing therefore our teachers' professional development as a spiral. And I think this metaphor is convenient for many reasons. And one of them is that it says that a spiral has always already started. That is, you don't have to start it. It's always there in your own daily practices and the way you teach and your skills. In the way you socialize with your students, there's always their potential for further growth and further systematization, of course. And research is basically a wonderful instrument, among many others, in order to make that spiral wider and more effective and more empowering for all of us, which is basically what we try to do. This educational spiral is about becoming better teachers, but always building on what we already do. And I've been taking notes, of course, about your contributions and technological resources, new supervising models in order to tutorize PhDs, students or thesis, etc. Narrative inquiry, the exploring emotions and beliefs. Well, all of these resources, some of them immaterial, some of them material, some of them human resources, ways to further socialize and encourage our students. These are all the kinds of resources that can help us amplify and expand this spiral, and for us to also trigger their own educational spirals in our students. And so, well, I don't have any question to ask you, but I'd really like you to, again, to hope that this session itself is a kind of spiral in which we all been included, and that we can all keep on advancing upward, keep on making upward turns, and therefore making the radius of our own spiral wider and wider, also by, again, discussing, sharing, collaborating in the future, if that's possible, although I know the times are difficult in that regard too. Again, many questions have been asked, many wonderful comments have been written down, but I want again to stress the fact that all of your chapters bring resources that can help us grow. And growing means that we are already made a way, we have already covered ground, but it's simply to move on, keep on going, and using the resources in a more explicit and informed way. I don't know, Emily, Darío, would you like to establish any questions or simply echo the comments that's already been shared? What do you think?
Emily? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm happy to share a couple of thoughts, and then maybe we can go to Michael's question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so a really interesting concept, I think, there of the spiral, Luis, and I think that So as we were writing, as you were speaking, I wrote down a few notes, and one of them was a quote from Michael that teaching is always an intervention. And I really like that quote, and thinking about the way that actually what you're doing in the classroom, in whichever classroom you are, or any type of context you're working in, is always, it's part of this natural process of reflecting on and intervening and changing things and seeing what happens. And that's actually research in a very natural form. But what you've all done through these projects is to make that process much more explicit and visible, so that you can communicate it to others and they can also follow what you do and use those frameworks, you know, in other ways. So that's in terms of research as a process and being very natural. And I think that correlates with the idea of it being part of your continuous development, as well as I think a lot of you know talked about collaboration in various forms. So either collaborating groups of students together, or you collaborating with your students, and PhD supervisors collaborating with their students. So all these different forms of collaboration, and seeing Lannan and Veronica here today reminded me of our Vygotskian sociocultural framework group that we used to have in Sydney a few years ago. And Veronica's paper reminded me of Vygotsky's theory, and the way that actually people are all within the environment for development, we are all each other's stimulus for development, and that's where collaboration and the role that collaboration has in research is crucial, absolutely crucial. So yes, your chapters just made me think about those things and your summaries today. So thank you very much, everybody, for your contributions. And Dario, did you want to add any thoughts before we go to Michael's question?
No, not really, but maybe we can think about, or we can now go to Michael's question about the tensions that we teacher educators might go through. Let me read his question. So he says, what do we do when our aims and objectives as teacher educators come into conflict with wider structures under neoliberalism? Michael, would you like to kick off?
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, I mean, the reason I asked that, I mean, I hope that doesn't sound too vague. I actually think it runs through everything. So, and it's very practical. So, for example, in the context of what we did when we were trying to promote collaboration, Vygotskian dialogue, participation, there's a kind of pressure in the other direction. And I think COVID's shown us this to a certain extent. If you like, as a kind of banking model, that you just provide information electronically and remotely, which is somehow supposed to be engaged with by the student. And very often, you know, there are resource issues around time, and there's a kind of danger of the whole educational process being commodified. Now, for me, I don't know if it's Bakhtin that talks about two things kind of pushing in the opposite direction. And I think that there's an issue around what we all want to do, which I think I'm safe in assuming is promoting collaborative, genuinely democratic participation by as many people as possible, and a kind of ideology which I think sees education as a commodity to be marketed. And obviously distance learning technology allows us to do that. And it allows people whose motivations might be different to ours to package up and to market knowledge in a way which we might not necessarily be entirely comfortable with. I mean, that's my view. I'd just be interested to know, you know, what happens when we do engage with these structures, because I think we need to. Sorry, I hope that made sense.
Well, it does, and you have just made me think about what happened during the pandemic, where, for example, we as lecturers were asked to record ourselves giving lectures, or like bits of no longer than 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
But there was no engagement. They could be watched at any time. And what happened was that the students wouldn't watch the lectures, they wouldn't engage with the videos, or they wouldn't engage in these collaborative online tasks that we had developed. Because to them, and even to us, that wasn't what we wanted. And in fact, it became an issue in terms of recruitment of new members of staff, or what to do when what you have put together in a video is, of course, a commodity, and therefore the university to some extent doesn't need you anymore, because now you have been captured in a video and they could reproduce that lecture again and again, which is what we do with YouTube or TED Talks or whatever it is. So I think it is a conversation that we need to have, because it has an impact on, as you just said, the wider structures, and in the case of higher education, how they operate, and how instruction is packed and delivered and marketed. Because again, this is something that universities, and you are well aware of this, Michael, in the context of the UK, there's now this strong drive to move towards online learning, so that we reach out to more markets, not students, but so that we diversify the market that we are trying to go for. Any thoughts, any ideas from other people in the room?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Stunned silence.
No, that's fine. Maybe because it is something that we need to digest and think about.
No,
absolutely.
Darío,
yes.
I of course have many thoughts on this. The only thing I wanted the people, of course, to share their own before that, but I think it's a key question, the one that Michael has posed, but I don't have a really single answer. I think there's not one answer, but it also depends on the approach that you want to give or you want to embrace as to this problem. Because in the same way as you have said that neoliberalism pervades everything, and this power structure puts obstacles and decides and shapes our teaching, I would say that its alternative, democracy, is also all over the place. At least potentially. That is, neoliberalism cannot be absolute. It cannot, because then we would all be dead. No? So in the same way that neoliberalism is all over the place and pervades everything, and democracy is also always there, at least with a seed of democracy. That's why the spiral is so meaningful for me, because there's always some grounds on which to start working and insisting. And of course, at the end, at some point, you will reach power structures, and then we will have to negotiate with them. But there's also always plenty of soil on which to seed and to place our seeds and continue working. No, the democracy will never be completely dead or eliminated, nor will our teaching, nor will education, no matter how much we are insisted on. We are forced to carry out online learning, etc. There will be always some spaces in which true education will happen, and therefore will be even improved, I think.
Can I just quickly come back on that? Is that okay? I don't want to.
Yes,
dominate.
I think we've got Liliana with her hand up, and then we get back to you, Michael, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. I will be very quick. I was reading Luis very well, and I believe that the democracy, although sometimes it's difficult, it will not die in our classrooms, basically because we are emancipatory by nature, and we want to enact agency changes, and ourselves are proof of that, right? So despite you don't, or you can be adjusted to systems completely, which is the idea of humankind, otherwise we would all be dead. Constant evolution and constant change in our classrooms, and precisely the type of things that we do in voicing students. I think that if something has changed in the last generations, And if we compare the way in which, well, I see younger faces than myself, but if something can be compared, is precisely this voicing and this enactment and this empowerment that we are giving to students. I mean, when I was in undergraduate, perhaps 3 or 4 teachers were making me part of their practices. Here, from day one, I know that we do it because at least the ones that we are writing the chapters, I could read that variable and this a good line among our writings and our speeches today. We are involving students, and I think that the way how and how Tammy portrayed it, the way how we are making, and also for Nancy, the way how practices are more and more inclusive, not only in terms of ethnicity, in terms of the pedagogies itself, the more prone we are to make better citizens, and citizens that are also transcending this to their own students, because that's the way how simply they are exposed to. We learn it by practice. That's why we can say that experiential learning can work, right? But our students perhaps will have a better say, and better students will have hopefully a better say in that as to all of these concepts and the fusion of them.
Thank you, Liliana. Michael?
Yeah, I mean, just to say that I'd agree with everything that's been said. I didn't mean it as a kind of give up and kind of die. We can't fight neoliberalism. I've spent 30 years fighting it, as you can probably tell by the lines on my face. But I think absolutely. I think we shouldn't. I'm not saying that anybody is here, but I think we should be careful about making the assumption that everybody is switched onto this. The commodification of education is global and it's worldwide, and I think that we need to know what we're dealing with. But absolutely, the classroom is a democratic space, and teachers and students in it are citizens, and all power to the struggle against it. Yeah.
Thank you, Michael. And maybe I would like to finish off this webinar and this opportunity for us to discuss the volume and to meet for the first time for many of us with the idea that through teacher research at the level of or within the identity of language teacher education has allowed us, or can allow other people in the profession, to think about the issues that we have talked about today, to extend the conversation and to look at add-on practices, because more often than not, we researchers researchers tend to look at or to look into other people's classrooms, and therefore by examining add-on practices, then we come to understand and to interrogate all these other issues that initially start with investigating add-on classrooms, but then lead us to examine and interrupt other constructs and other ideologies that, of course, surround the work that we do. So I would like to thank you all again for being here. Thank you very much for your contribution to the volume, and more importantly, your contribution to language teacher education in your own contexts. So I hope you all have a lovely weekend, and let's stay in touch. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Nice meeting all of you guys.
Thank you. Nice meeting you very much.